Hey everyone, so we're moving on to looking at qualitative research methods for this week's module. And if you are one of those people that still has yet to receive your textbook from the WV bookstore, just know that I put a lot of information, a lot of reading material within this module, and so if you have your textbook, just consider a lot of the readings to be supplemental to the text in chapters 5 and 6, more specifically chapter 6, chapter 5, just kind of an introduction to qualitative and quantitative research in general, but specifically chapter 6 and looking at qualitative research methods. So I put a lot of reading on there, so don't look at it and think, oh my God, Dr. Simpson, what were you thinking? We've already read 2 chapters. So if you've read the textbook, great. Read over, look over, review the information that I put up. The videos I hope are useful for you as well. But if you haven't received the textbook yet, then I'm not going to post the chapters this week. I'm going to eventually get in trouble if I keep posting chapters to a textbook. But you have enough information that I'm very confident that you're going to get just as much information, if not more, from the materials that I put up within the module itself. So qualitative research methods, or qualitative research in general, seeks to answers to questions by examining social settings. And we see qualitative research within sociology, anthropology, and really in any kind of the humanities, including psychology, counseling, clinical psychology, all of the mental health type areas of study as well. But if you're thinking about certain characteristics and how to differentiate between qualitative and quantitative, qualitative research tends to take longer, and by longer I mean a lot longer. A lot of these studies, especially when you're reading about grounded theory, there's not ever a technical end to a research study. You could technically be looking at and examining patterns of behavior for a certain group of individuals throughout your entire career, and sometimes that's what scientists in that particular field might be doing. That's what an anthropologist might be doing, or a sociologist might be doing. Qualitative research is hypothesis generating. So we're not going in and finding the answer to a question necessarily. Generally, with qualitative research, you have an idea, it's formed, and you end up with a lot more questions at the end of it than you might have come into the research itself. It's not a matter of taking numerical data or information and translating it to data, to numbers, and sticking it all in a computer program like SPSS, and then it, does all the information, the calculations for you, and outputs nice graphs. Although there are computer programs that do help qualitative researchers analyze their data, but it's not as simple as putting in numbers and getting the answers out. Really, within qualitative research, you're looking at the meaning of things, concepts, different definitions, how we come to define certain things, how we come to understand certain concepts, looking at symbols and metaphors and language and how we speak to each other and communication patterns. It's all of that, and finding common themes that might help further our understanding. There are various ways to collect data within qualitative research. Interviews between a small group of individuals, typically focus groups, ethnography, which you're going to learn a lot more about, in case studies, which you should be very familiar with, the idea of case studies and counseling, sociometry, which is measuring relationships within a specific group, unobtrusive measures, so that could be, for example, looking at RSA data, the Rehab Services Administration data, and looking at that and analyzing it in a different way, or looking at census data, so where the researcher is not really coming into contact in any way whatsoever with the participants of the research, but using information that's already out there. And historiography, which is looking at history, essentially. The 3 most common methods, and these are the ones that you're going to be really looking at this week in this module: phenomenology, ethnography, and grounded theory. And so I'm not going to go into too much detail about these, but phenomenology is looking at lived experience, and we do that a lot within the counseling profession, right? We we are hoping to better understand somebody else's lived experience and how that shapes their worldview, their theories of discourse, their concept of self, and really what is the meaning of or purpose of whatever that construct is that we're looking at. Ethnography is observational. Ethnography is used a lot of times to study different cultures, and so it might be an individual, the researcher coming in and viewing, observing individuals within a specific cultural group and their behaviors, actions, and things of that nature to figure out what those patterns of behavior might be. Grounded theory, like I said, it's that one that just can go on and on and on forever. It's very process oriented, so it's asking questions, and then if this and that, then this and that, and this and that, and you're going on and on forever. So it's kind of the process of becoming, again, whatever that construct might be that you're looking at. Other methods, again, case studies, you guys should be very familiar with those. Historiography or oral tradition, examining historical events, narratives, like going back and reviewing like letters that come home from individuals that served in World War I within a specific region, like France or something like that, and seeing if there's commonalities and what the patterns are in those persons' experiences. Action research is very evaluative. Dramaturgy is using theatrical metaphor to understand social interactions. And so what the heck does that mean? Well, that means if you're looking at a group of individuals and their social interactions, you might be saying, well, that person's a key player in this role, or that person's taking a back seat, so maybe they're more of like an extra in this experience that we're observing. And then discourse or interaction analysis is the study of talk and text, so verbal and nonverbal communication and text, which could be online, documents, whatever it might be, in terms of a social context. I would say that given the explosion of communication via text-based modalities, social media, and things of that nature, qualitative researchers that focus specifically on discourse analysis are getting a lot more information now than they may have ever gotten before. The design, I would say, is the most unique aspect for qualitative research. This is not a scientist sitting behind a desk and looking at numbers. You might find that the person is actually out there in the field. More often than not, they're out there in the field. A book that I absolutely love that I highly recommend is a book called Gang Leader for a Day. And the guy's name that wrote it is Sudhir, and I cannot pronounce his last name, Venkatesh. Venkatesh. I'm looking at Amazon right now to tell me how to spell that. But he's a sociologist that for his dissertation research inserted himself into one of the major gangs in Chicago in the early 2000s, I believe. And he befriended the head of the gang and was allowed to observe their behaviors, good or bad, observe their interactions, and better understand the hierarchy of a gang. And at one point, they even allowed him to be the leader for the day, hence the title Gang Leader for a Day. But that's an example of phenomenological research study with qualitative research. He put himself into the field. He was observing the experiences of the people living in that gang, and then making inferences afterwards. The researcher is key in terms of collecting the information, collecting the data, taking copious amounts of notes, recording interactions to a degree, observing behaviors. If you're thinking about qualitative researchers working in the field, you're going to have somebody that's writing down every single little thing, and not just how the conversation went, but what the person might have been wearing, what the weather was like that day, what was going on in the community in that particular moment. So it's very detail oriented. And then the hardest part with qualitative research that typically contributes to it taking so much time is that all of this written information, all of the data that's been collected has to be analyzed. And so it's a matter of people putting all this information into a computer program that then might pick out keywords that a person said within an interview multiple times. And then that researcher might look at those keywords and say, oh, they used, this... Let's say I read a case study recently where the individual being interviewed continuously said that they were living under the poverty line, under the poverty line, under the poverty line. And so the researcher picked up on that part and then looked at that term a little bit deeper to understand what that meant with that particular individual. So it takes a long time. I guess that's kind of my main point here. It takes a long time, and it does involve complex reasoning, and looking at data in a different way, because it's not numbers, because it's words, it's expressions of emotion, it's contextual, and so it's not just looking at, whether or not somebody selected, A, B, C, or D on a Likert type scale for research, and then put it into that survey and, outputted, what the most occurring theme was, depending on what your research is. So it is a little bit different. And oftentimes it takes a team of individuals. So you might have one primary researcher and then a team of people that are supporting that researcher and taking a different look at the data that's being collected. There are a lot of ethical issues that come up with qualitative research, both positive and negative. It really requires that the researcher acknowledge their bias in terms of whatever group it is that they're studying or looking at, or whatever questions are being developed from the qualitative research design that they are performing. And so we'll talk more about that, obviously, whenever we get into the week that specifically focuses on ethics. But in terms of the benefits, certainly from a multicultural perspective, rather than just saying, this group of individuals acts this one way because of A, B, and C reasons, a person's able to go and observe different cultures, different ways that individuals from different cultural backgrounds interact with each other, with their families, with their communities, and so you get a little bit deeper. It hits a different level in terms of understanding a group of individuals. So with that, I'll leave you guys to the readings that you have for today, for the week, and then the only thing that's due at the end of the week, there's no discussion for this module. The only thing that is due is your first research analysis, so be searching for an appropriate research article and follow the guidelines on how to analyze that research article for me. And with that, I'll leave you guys to it. Have a great week.